Hi friends, my name is Bhavya Mangla. I'm IITF qualified author having experience of more than 32 years in the domain of quality management system and production. I'm again back with a very interesting topic, and today I'm going to talk about the basic structure about ISO 30415, which is talking about diversity, equity and inclusion. And by the time this video will end, you will understand what exactly is diversity, equity and inclusion, what exactly is the standard ISO 30415, what about the structure of this particular standard, and how any organization can understand more about this particular standard. Well, if we talk about India, India is a diverse country. We know there are different kind of religions: Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Christianity, Jainism. And if we talk about languages, we have got more than 20 different languages which are spoken across India. Something similar is with respect to this particular standard, ISO 30415, which was published in the year 2021. It's talking about diversity and inclusion. One very important thing about this particular standard is that it considers 4 different SDG goals, Sustainable Development Goals, which are talking with respect to gender equality, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and SDG goal number 10 is talking about reduced inequality. So let's first start with understanding the basic definition of diversity. So if you look into the standard ISO 30415, the basic definition which is given is that it is a characteristics of differences and similarities between people. So what does it mean? It means that people can be differentiated on the basis of sex, on the basis of their religion, on the basis of their culture, casteism, from where they belong, and there can be different things on which they can be done. So that's all about diversity. Then before talking about the definition of equity, let me tell you an interesting definition about equality, because that will tell you the difference between equality and equity. When we talk about equality, the definition is state of being equal, especially in status, rights, opportunities or outcomes. But here one interesting thing is that when we talk about equality, we are saying that everyone should be given the same food, or maybe everyone should be given the same salary. But does it mean that we don't look into the background, we don't look into the output they are giving? That's why there is another definition, equity, which comes into picture. So the definition of equity, it talks about the principle that policies and processes and practices that should be fairly applied and individual needs recognized. What does it mean? Say for example, there are two GTs, means they are joining a particular company. So one is from a very poor background and one is from a very affluent background. Now both are being given a stipend of say 10,000 rupees. Now for a person who is from a very rich background, 10,000 is okay and does not matter if it is given or not. But what about the person who is coming from a very poor background? Whether this particular amount is relevant for both the people, or should we think about an equity in that particular sense? So this is all about equity. And the third is inclusion. When we talk about inclusion, the definition as per 30415 is practice of including all stakeholders in organizational context. So as I said about diversity, when we are talking about people from different caste, gender, religion, so okay, we have all those people, but what about their inclusion in their rights, in their responsibilities, whether they have been given all those things which we are giving to a particular sector or not? So that's all about inclusion. So if we talk about ISO 30415, there are clause from clause number 4 to clause number 11 which talks different things about this particular standard. So now I am going to talk about all those clauses one by one in brief. Starting from clause number 4, which is talking primarily with respect to fundamental diversity and equity and inclusion prerequisites. So it's talking about how we can recognize the diversity, how we can govern it effectively, what we can do to talk about accountability and we can work inclusively, what we can do with respect to communication inclusively, and how we can make sure that that becomes a part of our life. Then clause number 5 is talking about accountability and responsibility. So primarily it's more related to the top management or the leadership, because their role is most important. Unless and until any organization, the leader, the top person is serious about diversity and inclusion, nothing is going to happen. So top management is the driver of this particular standard. So that's why clause number 5 is dedicated only to the top management, that what they are doing with respect to the governance, leadership, responsibilities, and the individual responsibilities also. Then clause number 6 is talking about diversity and inclusion framework. So it's talking about a certain structure that organization should have, based on which they should effectively implement that. So here they are talking primarily about the principles and objectives, how we can set the accountability and responsibilities, what can be the valid and reliable qualitative and quantitative measures through which we can check, what can be the potential diversity and inclusion outcomes that can impact on all that. Then clause number 7 is talking about inclusive culture. Now, from clause number 7, one very interesting is there are certain structure which is being followed, and it is in part of 4. Part 1 is talking about general things, part 2 is talking about actions, part 3 is talking about measures, and part 4 is talking about the outcomes. So in this way, they have tried to communicate each and everything about the different clauses. Then coming to clause number 8, I think the biggest and the most important, or the heart of ISO 30415. So it's talking about human resource management life cycle. So if you look into it, there are 10 different clauses which are there, through which they have tried to cover anything and everything which can be possible in the organization. The first one is talking about general, holistically about everything. Then the second subclause here is talking about workforce planning, that whenever we are planning the workforce, are we taking into consideration about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Then the third clause, subclause, is talking with respect to the remuneration, that when we are planning the workforce, are we taking into consideration that how much money we should pay? It shouldn't happen that people say, for example, of a certain category or a caste or religion, they are getting more salary in comparison to this. So that is a way in which we need to plan at the time of remuneration. Then the next thing is talking with respect to the recruitment. Here again, diversity and inclusion is very important. Are we focusing only on one particular category? Are we focusing only one type of people? Maybe say, for example, we are thinking only that we have to take only youngsters and we should not take the older people. So, and it could be anything else. So that's another focus area. Then the next is talking about onboarding, that once we recruit a person, then when we are doing the onboarding, how we are doing it, are we taking into consideration all the requirements with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or there are some different things for different people that is there. Then the next subclause is talking about learning and development. Now, once we recruit a person, then we start teaching that person about the culture of the organization and what all they need to learn. So are we making any demarcation that, okay, a person of this particular category should be given more importance, a person of this particular category should not be given any importance? Are we doing like that? So that is about learning and development. Then the next subclause is talking about performance management. Are we being equal and having equity with respect to giving increments to people based on their performance, or maybe based on their background? Maybe a person with a political background is getting more salary, or maybe a person which has a good relationship with some senior is getting a better increment in comparison to the other person. So that's where diversity and equity and inclusion comes into picture, which needs to be taken care. Then the next subclause is talking about succession planning. Now we can't keep the people at one place. We need to move on the people from one process to another process. So if there is some partiality which is happening there, and to make sure that there is no partiality, what we are doing with respect to that. So this particular clause is talking about that. And the next is talking about workforce mobility. Now we need to put the people in different places, maybe different countries, different regions, different states, different cities. So what kind of policy we are having? Do we have a fair policy, or we have some specific special interest with respect to that? That is talking about that. And the last is talking about cessation of employment. Now when we are asking somebody to leave a company, is it because of certain reason, that person belongs to a particular religion, or person has a certain color, that's why we are doing it, or is it because of the fair reason? So in a way, if you see this clause number 8, it's talking about starting till then the entire life cycle of the human. And then the next subclause, or the next clause, is talking with respect to product and services. That is clause number 9, where they are talking about design, development, and delivery. So the intent is that when we are designing a particular product or any service, at that time, are we taking into consideration about diversity, equity, and inclusion? And something similar is in the next clauses with respect to clause number 10, procurement and supply chain, and as well as clause number 11, which is talking about external stakeholder relationship. So in both the clauses, the main intent is that when we are taking care, while we are taking care about all those things, are we ensuring that we are ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion with respect to each and every decision. And then last annexure is talking about a checklist. It's a fairly good checklist which talks about all the clauses from clause number 5 to clause number 11, which we can use it for our assessment process. And any organization which systematically and effectively implements diversity, equity, inclusion, they will always make sure that it is not only just because they have to implement it, but there should be a business reason for that. There should be a business case that should be there, and it is generally being said as per the different studies that the companies who are effectively implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion, they have a much more sustainable development, they have a much higher profitability, and people are more satisfied, and they are having a long life in that particular company. So if I do a summary, I talked about what exactly is the definition of diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion. Then I talked about the 4 SDG goals which are relevant with respect to this particular standard. And after that, I talked about the different standards from clause number 4 to clause number 11 which are applicable in this particular standard. My next video will be specifically with respect to clause number 4, where I am talking more with respect to that and to understand more in detail about that particular thing. Well, regularly I'm getting a lot of feedback and inputs from your side, so please do continue that. And in case you want to understand a little bit more about this particular video, if you click a link below, you'll find a blog there, and there you will find more information with respect to this particular video. And in case you are liking these kind of videos and blogs, you can always share with your friends and colleagues, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel and my website bhavyamangla.com. Thank you.